Okay, everyone, it is 8:30 p.m. My name is Ron. I'm an alcoholic. How you guys all doing? Welcome home. Hope you feel like home. We try to make it like home. We've got a lot of great snacks and eats and hot sausages and hot dogs and cheese dogs and sauerkraut and cronuts and guys brought stuff from New York, all kinds of low calorie, delicious food. Guaranteed not to put a pound on at this meeting. But anyway, we'll have some fun with this. What else we got? Anything we got announced now other than we got hoodies on back order. We spend a ton of time and money carrying this message to the sick and suffering, donating big books to the treatment centers because a lot of people who are in treatment centers never get to hear a message of recovery as outlined in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 steps. And that's what we do. See us afterwards. We always got plenty of different commitments at treatment centers and halfway houses and recovery homes and psych wards and hopefully prisons one day when they open them back up. That's what this group's all about. Anyway, with that, we have the world's greatest chairperson. Let's welcome Nick. Let's give him a warm welcome.
My name's Nick. I'm the world's greatest chairperson. My name's Nick. I'm an alcoholic. Welcome home. Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a 1-hour speaker meeting. It meets every Saturday evening at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, 301 North Main Street in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Food and fellowship starts at 8 p.m., followed by our speaker at 8:30. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday at 7 p.m. to 7:30 right here. Please come early and join us. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teaching of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others may benefit from the message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone new or from out of town who would like to introduce themselves with their first name? Yes.
Allison, Brooklyn.
Welcome, Allison. Yes, sir.
I'm Guy. Good to be here from Brooklyn.
Welcome, Guy. Thank you.
I'm Joey. I'm also visiting from Brooklyn.
Joey, welcome.
Also from Brooklyn.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm noticing a trend here.
I'll break it. My name's Chris. I'm an alcoholic visiting from Sandy Hook, New Jersey.
Very good, and a warm welcome to everybody. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with working knowledge of the 12 steps and is willing to sponsor, please raise your hands. Are there any announcements for the good of AA? There is a workshop at the Ivy Land Group. It's a big book workshop breakdown on 420. You can laugh now. It's a Saturday from 9:30 to 5. I have a flyer on my phone if anyone's interested in that. Come see me after the meeting. Our sister group is a big book study meeting that meets every Thursday at 7:30 just up the street at Salem UCC Church, 186 Court Street in Doylestown. Coffee is on at 6:15. We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of big books and CDs to help can't afford them can put donations on the jar on the table marked Big Book and CD Donations, and all CDs are available free of charge. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown, Pennsylvania, and our Facebook group. Subscribe and share. You can find our speakers there. Join our Facebook page to keep informed and share upcoming events and meetings. And now with that, I have Tom to come up and read the Just for Today Prayer of Recovery.
I'm Tom, and I'm an alcoholic. Just for the day. Just for today, I will be agreeable. I will look as well as I can, dress becomingly, talk low, act courteously, criticize not one bit, not find fault with anything, and not try to improve or regulate anyone but myself. And please help us introduce JJ to read the preamble. My name's JJ, I'm an alcoholic. Hold on, we'll find it here. This is the AA preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organizations, or institutions. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses or opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Now, Kara's going to come on up here and read the 12 steps.
Hello, everybody. My name's Kara, and I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic. Welcome home, everybody. The AA 12 Steps of Recovery. Number 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Number 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Number 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Number 4, made a searching and fearless more inventory of ourselves. Number 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Number 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Number 7, humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. Number 8, made a list of persons we had harmed and become willing to make amends to them all. Number 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Number 10, continued to take personal inventory when we were wrong, properly admitted it. Number 11, sought through prayer and meditation to prove our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry it out. And number 12, having a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And now I'd like to invite Nick to come back and he'll introduce our speaker.
We have a 7 tradition which states every AA group ought to be fully self-supported, declining outside contributions. At this time, we like to pass the baskets. We have no dues or fees. We do have expenses. And this group provides many services, and your donations cover food, bread, big books, CDs, events, and workshops. And if you don't have cash, we do have a Venmo. Just come see me after, and you can make a donation that way if you like. There's absolutely no smoking on church property. Please take a moment to silence all cell phones, and please try to limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. Now, to introduce our speaker, a good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group. Tonight we have Jimmy W. from the Primary Purpose Big Book Group of Brooklyn.
Hi, I'm Jimmy, and I am definitely an alcoholic. Let me catch my breath here. I was asked to speak 2 months ago, so I had a little time to kind of think about it, which is not a good thing for me, because I'm an alcoholic who suffers from self-centered fear and insecurities. And so I could really work things up between feeling, if you can feel excited and anxiety-ridden at the same time, I seem to manage to do that. So I got a little of that going in both directions. But I'm from Far Rockaway, Queens, actually. That's where I was born. It's the borough of Queens. And it's a Rockaway Beach section of New York. Just give you a little history. I mean, even in the Rockaways, Far Rockaway was considered a pretty bad neighborhood. And it was a poor neighborhood or working class, upper poor. We fell into the upper poor category. And my father was I want to talk about the background a little bit because it's important. I come from a home where alcohol was the norm. My father was an alcoholic. My mother was an alcoholic. They both were admitted alcoholics. I'm not diagnosing them from the podium. They both knew they had problems. My father was a World War II vet, from a Marine and a New York City cop, and scary character, and there was a lot of drinking in the house. I'm the youngest of 3, And my earliest memories, there was always drinking that seemed to start off very nice, but would turn into chaotic scenes of violence and fighting. And as a kid, I was always afraid. I felt uncomfortable. And you didn't talk about your feelings in my home. And you didn't talk about what was going on in the home outside of the house. So you were kind of like, I didn't know where to go with this stuff. Nobody talked about their feelings. My friends, I lived in a tenement building with a lot of my friends came from families that are very similar. So drinking, violence, fighting, a lot of just pure insanity was going on all around, certainly in my building, and it seemed like in the neighborhood. It was a neighborhood filled with lots of bars. All the socializing seemed to center in around the bars. If somebody died, you'd go to the wake, and then you'd have a party celebration of a person at one of the local pubs. If somebody got married, there was always the reception held at a local pub. Growing up, we often hung around the bars because that's where people went to socialize. People got off work, they stopped at the bar. It was just, and I say this because in Doctor's opinion, Dr. Silkworth wrote, men and women drink essentially because they like the effect of alcohol. But the sensation is so elusive that after a while they cannot differentiate true from false. To them, the alcoholic life seems like the only normal one. And so for me, this was the norm. Now, how I felt as a kid was I was fearful, insecure. Don't know where this stuff comes from, but I felt different than the other kids. I felt like I wasn't good enough on some level. And attached to that was you couldn't be honest about it. You didn't. Maybe other kids felt that way too, but nobody was talking about their feelings, so I thought I was the only one who felt like that. And I started drinking at a very young age. My parents used to play music, and when they drank. And my father went on a bender. My first time I got drunk. I was about 9 years old. My father had come home, and my mother wasn't talking to him. She was mad because he blew the paycheck yet again. And she went out to bingo, and he was banished to the couch to sleep off his bender. And I was listening I had this old phonographic record player that looked like a suitcase for people that are old enough, And my older sister had moved out by then, but she had left a bunch of old 45 records. And I was listening to the records, and I don't know what came over me, but I decided I wanted to go and sneak into the liquor cabinet, which was in the kitchen. It was a regular kitchen cabinet. And I deliberately went in there to sneak some booze. And what happened was I snuck past my father real quietly. I didn't turn on the kitchen light. I opened the refrigerator, so this was really clandestine, I was sneaking. I had the light from the refrigerator, and I took a bottle, and I took a swig, and it burnt and tasted terrible, but I didn't spit it out. I put the cap on, drank some water from the faucet, and I more cautiously took another bottle out and tried it. And the same thing happened. And I did that with every single bottle in that cabinet. And it was several bottles. And they were all stuff like Fleischmann's, Canadian Club, Crown Royal, probably some gin and vodka. And something happened. By the time I got to the last bottle, it didn't burn as much. It didn't taste as bad. But even more, I felt wonderful. I felt this sense of this freedom. And I took a can of soda that was in the refrigerator. It was cream soda. It was the only soda we had. It was the old tin cans. I opened it up, poured half down the drain, And then I commenced to mix different types of booze with it. And I went in and I played the same 45 record, both sides, over and over again, and I escaped from reality into a fantasy world. It never felt so good as a kid. All those insecurities were gone, all the fears were gone. I was in my own little world. And, I don't know, they described the phenomenon of craving. I don't know if I suspect I had this disease already on some level, because I not only wanted more alcohol, but I drank until I blacked out, and then I passed out. My mother had come home to find me on the floor in the kitchen. I don't remember how I got to the kitchen. The last thing I remember is I was singing "I Want to Hold Your Hands" by the Beatles. And they got me to my feet. She was like my father could be a violent guy, so she was like, "What'd you do to my baby?" And he woke up and not knowing what's going on, why she's hysterical. They got me to my feet, and I didn't feel so wonderful anymore. My room was going like an ocean. I'm looking at my mother. I have that feeling in my gut. I'm busted. And my mother looked at me, and I'll never forget. She just and said, "What's wrong with him?" And my father said, "The little bastard's drunk." And with that, I projectile vomited as if on cue. And was thrown into a cold shower, stripped down, and I was then experienced, the porcelain altar. I was hugging the toilet bowl, throwing up everything I had, experiencing the dry heaves for the first time as a result of drinking too much. And I said my first foxhole prayer, "Please, God, help me." And I said I was sorry to my parents, I'm sorry to God, I'm sorry to my father. By this time, the neighbors had gotten wind that little Jimmy was drunk. Now I'm there wrapped in a towel, naked, my sisters in the background laughing. So I'm experiencing all the humiliation, guilt, shame, and remorse right from the first drunk. And I made that promise, I'll never drink again. And, that's how it all started for me. I didn't know that alcoholism was a disease. Like I said, drinking seemed to be a normal part of society and living. And I had also another symptom of alcoholism. I had that built-in forgetter. I don't know how much time passed, but it wasn't very long. And I found a group of kids in my neighborhood that knew how to play hooky, hustle some money, and get somebody of age to go to the local liquor store and buy us some sort of cheap booze, and or to the local deli and get us beer. And I immediately fell right into a crew of kids that ran the streets like a pack of wild dogs, with no supervision, doing what we wanted, getting into trouble. It was like if they sold a kid instant delinquent, just add alcohol, I would have my picture on the box, because that's what happened. I started just, how did I say this? I think as a kid I liked baseball, I liked football, I liked fishing. I liked a lot of things that other kids liked, but they became secondary. They were excuses now to let's get a bunch of booze and go fishing. Let's go play sports so we could drink afterwards. Alcohol became an essential part of every activity. It was the main thing I looked forward to. And, I immediately started getting in trouble with the law. I was, as a kid, I said that I had this fear and stuff like this and these insecurities. I seen a lot of things that no kid should see. Exposed to things no kid should be exposed to. There was, I saw somebody get murdered. When I was 7 years old, they chased this guy from the Trouville bar There's a guy sitting here that knows that bar. They caught him, and they used a car hanger. Back in the day, they used that was a preferred weapon on the street fight. You could break it off, and use it like a whip, but it was sturdy enough and sharp enough to actually stab somebody, and that's what they did to this guy. And I witnessed this. In that same bar, the Trouvel, that same year when I was about 7 years old, my godfather and my neighbor were in the bar, and they were shot and killed in a holdup in a very horrific manner with a shotgun. And so I witnessed a lot of stuff that made it clear to me that the world was not a safe place. And you had to always be, you had to be tough. At least present a picture of being tough, otherwise you could be victimized. And, so I imitated the tough guys in my neighborhoods. I tried to be like the kids that I thought were cool. And alcohol enabled me to kind of do this for a little while. But I was always in trouble. I was always getting consequences from drinking. And I couldn't see that it was from the drinking. But there was always consequences. And there were times when I started to recognize, as I got older, that my life was going nowhere. I was a high school dropout by the time I was a teenager. I was in trouble with the law. And, for me, I didn't know what was really wrong with me. I had that thing. I don't know if anybody's ever done this here, but it was like you wake up and you're thinking. I started to have this really, not only a negative view about the world, but very self-critical and filled with self-hatred, filled with guilt, filled with shame. That feeling of being different was growing into festering inside like an infected wound. And it was my soul. It's the spiritual malady, I believe, that is the third part of this disease. It's not just physical, mental, but spiritual. And I think I had a spiritual malady, and alcohol was a way of me trying to treat that spiritual malady. And I was going through all these changes, and I just figured that maybe it's the Rockaways that are my problem. And I did what was the only way of doing the geographical I knew, was I went in and I enlisted into the military. And I was under investigation for arson. And I'll give you an idea of like what type of teenager I was. One night, why I was under investigation for arson. This is one night drunk for Jimmy Watson's life. I drank 2 half pints of some cheap scotch with 32-ounce beer chasers. Somebody, and it was the 60s and early 70s, so it was, there were other substances around. Somebody came up to me and said they had something, and I didn't even know what it was, but I said, I'll take some. And, I did those other substances alcoholically. Like I would do as much as I could, and I like to mix things. So I did this. And we're hanging out in this place called Milty's, and it's a row of stores, and there was a laundromat, and it was closed. But we heard a little pop, and we see 2 guys running from the closed laundromat. So we look inside, and I see on the floor of the store is a gallon plastic container, and it's burning on the top with a little line of fire going towards the back. Wow, they're trying to burn the store. I immediately knew what it was. So I checked the door. It's open. I open the door. My friends, don't go in there. I go in there, and I grab this thing, this container. I open the door, and I fling it out onto Mott Avenue. And it bursted. As soon as it left my hand, it turned into a ball of fire. Almost hit my friend that was screaming like my name. Jimmy, Jimmy, and all of a sudden, whoa, a big ball of fire flies out the door at him. Lands in the middle of the street, cars are stopped. I go into the back just to see if anybody was in there, and there's nobody in there, but the whole back was in flames. And now I turn around, and the smoke is thick, and I duck down, and I run for the front door, and I come running out. So everybody's sitting there. Now a big crowd sees me running out of this store that's now burning. And it turned into like a 5-alarm fire. The whole row of stores burned down. It was right across the street from a project. So you had all these people from the projects and all the people from the neighborhood, and the fire marshals were grabbing me and they were questioning me. And this other substance that I took while I'm already drunk starts to kick in and I'm hallucinating. And they're asking me questions about, you know, what happened. And I'm telling them the story I just told you, basically. And you know, the guy's repeating what he's writing, but in my mind, he's changing it. So I'm getting like paranoid, and there's all kinds of chaos going on. And one of my friends sees a guy from the projects that had ripped him off in a bad drug deal, and he's chasing the guy. And he goes, "Jimmy, stop that guy!" And I'm talking to a fire marshal, and I clothesline this guy as he runs by. And, you know, the guy gets up, and then, you know, a big brouhaha. It turned into a riot. Firemen are trying to put out this fire. There's a riot going on. I'm like disappear into the crowd, and then like the next morning I'm walking on a boardwalk in Far Rockaway, like smelling like smoke, crashing from the crap that I was on, coming down, and I'm feeling hungover, and I'm like, what happened? That's one night in my life. You know, so this type of stuff happened all the time with me, and you know. So I decided I needed to leave New York, and I went to Marine Recruiter, and I explained this story to him. And he said, well, the Marines would like you to go back and get your high school diploma and straighten out your legal problems. And I was like, that's not what I want to hear. So I come out of the recruiter, and across the hall was an Army recruiter. And so I looked at the Army recruiter. There's posters up of a Marine on one side, of a soldier on the other from the Army. And I was like, it's the same stuff. Same thing. So I walk in, and he signed me right up. And, you know, I had always had a problem with authority, and always had, like, we had a local beat cop that knew me by name. Benny Boland was a big Irish cop. And Benny, well, I think he caught us doing something. He was pouring out our liquor in a schoolyard that we hung out in, and I mouthed off to him, little wise guy that I was, and he busted my nose. And, you know, he said, go home and tell your father, Officer Boland, bent your nose for you, kid. And, like, you know, I wasn't going to do that. My father would have bent it the other way. You know, so I was like, for me, it was you know, and I wore it like a badge of honor. You didn't go cry like police brutality, you know. If you want to be a smart ass, you know, you got to pay the price. But so the thing was, this is how I was. I go into the service, and like I had a problem with authority. Not the brightest move, you know. So anyhow, you know. Everywhere I got stationed, I was getting locked up for being drunk and disorderly, getting into fights. I was always insubordinate. I was, you know, always getting into some sort of trouble. And I ended up hitting a sergeant and deserting. I took off with this motorcycle gang down in North Carolina. By this time, I was airborne in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And you know, so I hit this guy, and then I jumped on a motorcycle. I didn't know how to ride, but I had bought a motorcycle, and I hung out with these guys called the Rebel Rousers, and I was that damn New York Yankee on his Nazi bike, because they all had Harleys and I had a BMW, you know, and you know, I turned myself in at Fort Hamilton a couple of months later, and I was shipped to New Jersey, Fort Dix Criminal Control Facility, and I had a God experience. You know, I got to tell you this, though. The first day that I was in this criminal control facility, I snuck out and went downtown, Wrightstown, got drunk, and then snuck back in just at daybreak when they were going to have their morning formation. And when they did this, the sergeant, one of the guards, came up to me. He says, "How'd you get the liquor in to the place?" I said, "I didn't get any liquor in." He says, "You're drunk." And I said, "Well, I snuck out last night. I just snuck back in." And he looked at me like I was like, he couldn't believe it. But he liked me because I was honest with him. But that night, I'm hungover. I'm looking at my life. I'm looking at some time in Leavenworth and bad conduct discharge, and I'm questioning. What's wrong with me? I didn't join the Army. I wanted to get my life together. It's worse now. And I said another prayer, but this one was a little different. I asked God to give me acceptance. I asked Him to help me deal with whatever I have to deal with. And I said in this prayer, I said, if I had a Bible, because I associated prayer with religion, and I was raised Catholic, somewhat anyhow. If I had a Bible, I would know how to pray. And so the next day, that sergeant who liked me gave me a detail to go. They give you work details while you're waiting to be court-martialed. Gave me a detail to go and empty waste paper baskets in the legal offices. And the first one I came to was one of these little green waste paper baskets, and it was overflowed with paper. And in the middle was a little New Testament with Proverbs and Psalms, sitting in the middle on the top of the garbage. And it was a pocket-sized Bible. I couldn't believe it. I picked it up, I put it in my pocket, and I started reading it. And my whole attitude changed. Now, at this point, I didn't really know what an alcoholic was, but I stopped drinking. I started praying, and then I got, miracles happened. Instead of being court-martialed, that same sergeant came to me again, and he said, "How's your case going?" I said, "Not too good. They're going to make an example out of me." And they turned around, and he says, "That's a shame. You seem like a good trooper." And he goes, "Maybe you need a second opinion." I said, "Well, how am I going to do that? My court-martial's tomorrow." And he says, "Well, let me make a call." And he called the legal office, it's called JAG in the Army, and he got an appointment with this captain, a lawyer, to get a second opinion. And he let me out of the criminal control facility on my own reconnaissance to go there, promising that I would come back. He could have gotten a lot of trouble for doing this, but he let me do this. And what happened was I went there, and if this is not like God, it's really odd then, because I'm sitting in this legal office. Out comes this captain, and his name was Captain Bergeron. I grew up with a kid named Paul Bergeron. This was his older brother. And I couldn't believe it. He looked at me, he said, "James, what are you doing here?" And he hugged me, called him in his office. He made some phone calls. He talked. He was friends with the guy that was prosecuting me. And next thing I know, the court-martial was dropped. I lost any rank I had. But I got papers. I didn't get thrown out of the Army. I got papers to be sent to Fort Hood to finish my time. Paid some fines. And it was there I made my first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting in 1982. And how I ended up there was by this time, all that God stuff and getting out of trouble, I had the built-in forgetter, and I still had all them feelings that I'm not good enough and all that other stuff. And I went back to my solution, which was drinking, when I got stationed out in Fort Hood. And from there, I ran into a guy from the Rockaways, and we would go out drinking. He was in a different unit. But I made my first meeting because when I went to meet him one Friday night, he says, "I'm not drinking." And I looked at him, I said, "Well, you broke? I got money, I got you covered." And he said, No, I got money. And he proceeded to tell me a story how he had drank a bottle of rubbing alcohol because he was desperate for a drink. And they had to pump his stomach. They thought he had tried to kill himself, and now he was looking at being medically discharged for psychiatric reasons. And he said these words to me: "I think I have a problem with alcohol." And I looked at him like he had two heads, because I didn't see nothing wrong with drinking rubbing alcohol. I had drank it. He drank the wrong kind. That's all. You know, he must have drank the stuff that you're not supposed to do. It's got to be ethyl alcohol, right? So, but he then said, "I want to go to an AA meeting, and I've never been there, and I'm afraid to go alone. Will you come with me?" So I went with him, and that's how I ended up my first AA meeting. I was going for somebody else, and all I remember about that meeting is somebody said something like surrender, and I said, surrender isn't in my vocabulary, you know. Improvise, overcome. I gave him some, you know, military lingo, never surrender of my own free will, you know. And if command, I'll never surrender my men, you know, and that was the second code of conduct. So I said that, you know, in my head, and I stayed drinking for the next several years. I got out of the Army. They made me sign a thing swearing I'd never re-enlist. I went back to the Rockaways, and I turned around, and I went right back to doing go-nowhere jobs, drinking up the paychecks, sleeping on friends. I was basically homeless, sleeping on people's couches or, you know, floors. Took a hostage, found a girlfriend that had a daughter, and I cleaned myself up around her just enough for her to take me in, and then, you know, for the next several years we bottomed out until some things got really ugly. Board of Child Welfare took her daughter away. They have a different name for it now, ACS or something like that, but we ended up homeless. Marshals came. She turned to prostitution and street junkie. And me, I started in and out of detoxes, rehabs, therapeutic communities, halfway houses, sobering up stations. I was in and out of the hospital for the next several years. And back on the street, swearing I'll never drink again. And in those hospitals, of course, they would bring AA meetings in. And I would hear the message, and just couldn't seem to, I'd leave the hospital, and I, you know, could never make it to a meeting. You know, they tell you it's the first thing you should do when you leave a facility is go straight to a meeting. And I never did that. And so I kept getting drunk. And I ended up on the Bowery, New York's Bowery, because it was a good place for guys like me. They had flop houses, they had missions that fed you, they had a men's shelter, they had a sobering up station. And I got sober the first time was in 1989. I was homeless, jobless, a drunken junkie basically on the streets. And you know, I had a moment of clarity. I stopped blaming other people for my situation. And I asked God to help me. Again, God heard me. I started going to AA meetings, and this is what really got me to keep coming back, is people didn't, I was a derelict, and people didn't judge me. People welcomed me. They made me feel part of. They didn't talk down to me. They seemed to want me to keep coming. In fact, that's what they say, keep coming back, right? So, you know, but they would take me out to coffee, sometimes buy me a meal after the meeting. But they showed me a lot of love. And I started counting days living on the streets. And one of the things that they did to me, I was at this meeting called the Midnight Group in Manhattan, and there was a 6:30 meeting and followed by an 8 o'clock meeting. And there was a guy at his first meeting, and I was bitching and moaning about the Bowery mission have to sit through a sermon or something to get a breakfast. I was complaining. And a couple of these guys that were very tolerant of me all along turned around and said, they probably got sick of hearing me complain, said, why don't you go over and give that new guy, his first AA meeting, he says, day one, why don't you give him some AA, give him some of the program. And I was like, I got like 30, 60 days, something like that, and I was like, I'm a homeless relapser, what am I going to give him? And they said, show him some of the love and kindness that we showed you. Introduce yourself. See if he has a meeting list. Show him how to read it. Ask him if he wants a cup of coffee. If he's shaken, only fill it up halfway. Talk to him. And you know what? I did, and all those things that I was complaining about disappeared, at least for that night. I didn't feel bad about it. And for the next 12 years, I did what's called two-stepping. It's working the first step by going to meetings, doing service, and helping others. But I never really fully addressed that inner stuff that I talked about. I didn't really have a connection to that higher power because I used God like a bail bondsman. You know, when I was in pain or in trouble, I prayed. And then once I was out of trouble, I forgot about them. Yeah, there's a price to be paid. Or I used God as a vending machine. Give me what I want. But I had a built-in forgetter about how God had looked out for me. And, I would slip back into living on self-will without even seeing it. I had always kind of held on to doing things, having conditions on my recovery. As long as I wasn't drinking, I felt nobody could say nothing to me. And, I was still dishonest. I was still inconsiderate. I was still selfish. I was still filled with fear. I was still plagued with guilt and shame. I still had self-hatred. I was still judgmental of other people. And, you could only, get a free pass and live on grace, in my experience, for so long before this catches up with you. And it caught up to me after 12 years. I wasn't living right, and I got angry. Somebody did something that got me really angry, and I drank at them in a rage. And that started a 16-year relapse where the things that had worked for me before weren't working anymore. So I knew how to put a Band-Aid on by grabbing a newcomer and taking them out for coffee like people did for me. I knew how to do service to get out of myself, but that wasn't working anymore. I had lost that connection to the grace of God that was keeping me sober, and I didn't know. I didn't know the grace of God was keeping me sober. Not really, until I lost my sobriety, and I couldn't get it back. That was driven home. Like a true, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, right? Well, when you know what's going to happen and you pick up anyway, that's true insanity. Because I had two types of thinking before I would pick up, right? I would think that this time I'm going to control it, which I stopped believing that a long time ago. Or I convinced myself I didn't care about the consequences, which is truly insanity, because I did care about the consequences. For me, this went on and on for the 16 years. I had, by this time, taken another hostage and gotten married. I had blown everything again. And I really was in the depths of hopelessness and despair when 6 years ago, 8 months and 24 days ago, I decided that, I'm not going to get sober again. I might as well kill myself. It'd be better for me and be better for everybody in my life. So I went on a bender to drink, to get up enough courage to kill myself. And it was wife was away. I found an old piece of hemp rope. I fashioned a hangman's noose and tied it to my chin-up bar in my doorway in my kitchen, and proceeded to drink, build up the courage, and then I was going to do it. And I got to this little step stool. You know, chin-up bar in a doorway is only about so high, so there's not much drop. And, you know, and it was an old hemp rope. It was rough. So I get this thing around my neck, and I'm on this thing, I'm stepping off, and I realize this is going to hurt. I didn't count on, like, I'm in pain. I don't want to feel more pain. And out of the corner of my eye, when I'm like trying to figure out what to do about this dilemma, I see on the table there's still a bottle with some booze in it. Well, I might as well finish that, and then I'll go to the park and find a tree where I can get a good drop. Break my neck real quick, right? This is the way I'm thinking. So you know what happened. I drank that booze, and then wanted more booze. You know, and so I lasted a couple more days till my wife came home, seen the hangman's noose, looked at me with a look of sorrow on her face, sadness and fear that melted, just broke that icy wall of self-centeredness a little bit. And she said, "You got to get help." And of course, I argued with her at first because I was hopeless, and and it was didn't make no sense. It wasn't going to work for me because I'm different. Something's broken in me. You know how dramatic we could be. And but she wore me down. I was actually, when she came in, I had run out of booze, so I was drinking a glass of Listerine, like it was a cocktail. And so this is how I started my recovery process. And I'm going to fill in the next 10 minutes with talking about that process. I finally said, okay, and if you can get me somewhere, I'll go. And I'd been in a lot of these places. I didn't think it was going to help. And she wasn't having much success with the call she was making. So I called my friend. He's in the room too, my friend Guy. Yeah, I knew him from AA. And I said, "Guy, I need to get into a detox." And he said to me, he said, "When was your last drink?" I said, "About an hour, two, I don't know." He says, "Well, tell Allie, my wife, to get you a beer, and I'll be there in 15 minutes. He was afraid I would go into withdrawals and DTs. And so, of course, good alcoholic, I said, "Allie, Guy says get me a six-pack." And they picked me up and drove me around town. And, it's like, I could picture Mary and Joseph going around, there was no room in the inn. Nobody had a bed. They even told one, but everywhere I went, they medicated me with stuff like Librium. So I wasn't, and I had just enough alcohol in me. I was feeling great again, but I had surrendered on some level and agreed that I would go. And even though they didn't get me anywhere that day, I said, "I promise I'll go with you tomorrow to Bellevue." And now Bellevue, I went to Bellevue with Allie in the morning, and they didn't have any detox beds either. And she said, "Tell him you tried to kill yourself." And so I did. And next thing I know, you're not allowed to leave. It's no longer a choice. And it was quite a process of sitting in there waiting to be put into the psychiatric observation ward. And it was a scene from, you picture every movie you ever seen, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, on steroids. And I went in there, and I was so angry. So let me tell you, the psychiatric observation ward is not conducive to good mental health. But I knew when I looked around that I belonged there, that I was no better than anybody in there. The only difference between me and them was they didn't know what their problem was. I knew what my problem was. I started thinking about Alcoholics Anonymous. And I started thinking about, how come I can't stay sober? And words came to my mind, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. And I thought to myself, I think I got honest. I had claimed to go through the steps, but I had always held back. I had never fully surrendered. I had always had conditions. I had done half measures at best. I did what was easy and avoided what was difficult. In the 7th step, in the 12 and 12, it says, if you give an alcoholic a choice between character building and comfort, they usually try to take comfort first. So I always looked for an easier, softer way. And I knew that. And I thought about how it works. We read it at a lot of meetings. It says, those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. I couldn't lie anymore. I couldn't say AA wouldn't work for me because I knew I hadn't fully trusted in the process and given it a chance. And I had a spiritual experience that moment, and I said, please, God, give me the willingness to go to any length. And I immediately felt like it's not going to work. I can't do this. And the next thought that came was, I'm sure was divinely inspired. Yes, you can for one day. Nobody's asking you to be perfect. You can do this for one day. You do the best you can. That's all anybody ever asked of you. And at that point, I made a decision. And I came out, and I immediately got into doing the steps. I looked at that whole thing. I was convinced that any life run on self-will could hardly be a success. And I had to look at where I was living on self-will. What was blocking me from God? Where I was playing God? What were my false gods? What were the things that I tried to fill that hole with? Was it money? Was it sex? Was it validation? Prestige? During that time, I was 12 years sober. I did a lot of service because I got validated. When you become somebody in an anonymous program, watch out, you're in trouble. For a while there, I was doing really good in AA. I was doing a lot of service in hospitals, institutions. I took meetings to Sing Sing prison. I was a public information speaker for New York Intergroup. I would talk to non-alcoholics, basically about the preamble. A spirit of cooperation with professionals in the medical, psychiatric, and in religion. I talked to hundreds of people about AA while I wasn't really living it. But it gave me prestige. It filled my fragile ego to make me feel like I was okay. I can't do that anymore. I got to be an honest. I think that the key is to learn my sponsor now likes to point out we have hold, hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. There's another hold. It's humility, acceptance, love, and tolerance. And humility is the key to me changing. First step for me, it applies to a lot of things in my life. My way doesn't work. Be open-minded to a new perspective. When I did a 4th step, I was able to look at, I did it right out of the book. Resentments, fears, sexual conduct, and harms done others. And I took it and I read it to another human being because that's a demonstration of willingness and a demonstration of humility. Plus, I don't have a very good history with self-honesty. I could rationalize and justify a lot of my behaviors to still blame others. I went and did a 6th step after doing my 5th step. I'll tell you this, I shared a lot of the things. Part of my fears was guilt and shame. Things that no matter what good I was doing, there was always that little voice that says, yeah, but you know you're a piece of crap because. the secrets. You're as sick as your secrets, I would hear in meetings. When I shared with this other man all these different things, he didn't bat an eye. He nodded his head, looked at me, and then he shared some of his own stuff. And what he didn't have an experience with, he had no judgment. It was the first time that I felt that I wasn't the worst person in the world. I wasn't the best. I was just one of the other billions of people that are on this planet. It was the first time I felt part of the human race. And I took this to God, and I sat for an hour, and I reviewed the first 5 steps. And I asked myself, do I believe God can remove these things? Am I ready to let him? If I'm not, if there's anything I'm questioning, I need to pray for the willingness. I then said the 7-step prayer. I called my sponsor up, the guy that I was doing the steps with, and he basically said, "Okay, you're ready?" I said, "Yeah, I'm ready." "Prove it." He goes, "If you really want to develop the humility you need for God to hear that prayer, you got to look at what your character defects, the exact nature of your wrongs that we have just discussed, have affected and hurt others. That takes a greater degree of humility." And so I did that. And the day that I brought him that 8-step list, he laid out, before I ever did a 9th step, he laid out a plan of doing 10, 11, and 12, and to put this into daily practice. And that's been my recovery process. As I've gone out, and it says it in the 10th step, we have now entered the world of the Spirit. Our next job is to grow in effectiveness and understanding and effectiveness as we cleaned up the past. We continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, fear, and anger. When these crop up, not if they crop up. We go to God at once. We discuss them with another human being. We make amends right away, and then we focus on helping others. I think you told me to go until 9:25. I just want to read one thing. It has to do with spiritual awakening. It'll be brief. Step 12. Maybe there are as many definitions of spiritual awakening as there are people who have had them. But certainly, each genuine one has something in common with all the others. And these things are that they have in common are not too hard to understand. When a man or a woman has a spiritual awakening, the most important meaning of it is that they have now become able to do, feel, and believe that which they could not do before on their unaided strength and resources alone. They have been granted a gift which amounts to a new state of consciousness of being. They have been set on a path which tells them they are really going somewhere. Their life is not a dead end, not something to be endured or mastered. In a very real sense, they have been transformed. That's what we're aiming for here. God bless. Thank you for having me.
Incredible stuff. Good evening, everyone. My name's Brian. I'm an alcoholic. First and foremost, I want to thank Jimmy for coming out here, delivering an incredible message to our group tonight. We're right up against it, so a couple quick announcements and we'll close it down here. As Ron mentioned before the meeting, the food and the fellowship for this group starts at 8 o'clock every week. Feel free to show up early, enjoy the refreshments, the coffee we put out. There's always a meeting after the meeting if you want to help us with some service work, put away the chairs, we appreciate it. But more importantly, if you're new or if you're struggling, grab somebody after the meeting. We'd love to talk with you. It's customary for us to thank our speakers as they come here on their own time and expense, so we usually form a line in the front. We thank our speakers. Thanks to Howard in the back for making the coffee there. thanks to everybody. Thanks to our greeters, our readers tonight, everybody who helped set up for the meeting. And let's give Jimmy, our speaker, one more. And if you do care to join us, we have a beautiful way of closing down the meeting. Oh yeah, we're going to circle up. We're going to circle up. Doing it the old-fashioned way. I thought you could be able to. There was nothing like stand right up. All right, now as always, we'll close down the meeting with a brief moment of silence for the still sick and suffering alcoholic, followed by our Lord's Prayer. Our Father,